The banging echoed for nearly 4 hours, not from a construction crew, not from a storm, but from inside my own garage. Evelyn Harper, the self-proclaimed guardian of Willow Creek's aesthetic purity and HOA dictator, was hammering her impeccably, polished nails against the reinforced interior of my freshly constructed garage wall, shrieking about unlawful confinement and breaches of community decorum. I leaned back in my lawn chair, sipped my iced tea, and cranked up the classic rock on my portable speaker, admiring the smooth cedar paneling I just installed on the side of the garage. That didn't contain Evelyn. Let me rewind a bit. My name's Nathan Carter, a retired mechanical engineer who traded city life for the quiet of Willow Creek, a suburban haven with tree-lined streets and enough garage space. For my vintage car restoration projects, I built a modest, code-compliant garage in my backyard. Nothing extravagant, just a functional space with good lighting and a polished concrete floor. But that was enough to ruffle the feathers of Evelyn Harper, the HOA president who ruled Willow Creek like it was her personal kingdom. Evelyn rolled through the neighborhood in a gleaming silver Lexus, always dressed in tailored blazers that screamed, "I'm in charge." She once filed a complaint against a neighbor's mailbox for being insufficiently reflective, and had a reputation for measuring lawn grass with a ruler to ensure it didn't exceed the HOA's 0.5-inch limit. Her front yard boasted 8 motion sensor cameras and a sign declaring her the Willow Creek Safety Ambassador. And then there was her clipboard and ever-present accessory filled with what she called community enhancement notes. My crime, building a fully permitted, HOA-approved garage without personally consulting Evelyn about its visual synergy with the neighborhood. Trouble started a week after I poured the concrete foundation. At 6:45 a.m., Evelyn appeared at my doorstep, clipboard in hand, wearing a mustard yellow pantsuit that somehow made her look like a walking caution sign. "Nathan, we need to address your construction project's impact on our community's curb appeal," she declared, stepping onto my porch uninvited. I showed her my permits, my architect's drawings, and the HOA's approval letter. She peered at the documents through her designer glasses, her lips pursed like she was deciphering a foreign language. "These papers don't account for the emotional toll of utilitarian structures on our suburban serenity," she said. I had no idea what that meant, but I knew it wasn't good. The citations started arriving the next day. Garage roof pitch disrupts aesthetic cohesion. Visible tool rack undermines residential tranquility. And my favorite, potential oil drips threaten local groundwater aesthetics. Each notice came on crisp HOA letterhead, signed in Evelyn's unmistakable emerald green ink. I ignored them, assuming reason would prevail. I was wrong. Evelyn escalated her campaign into something straight out of a suburban spy novel. She launched what she called community wellness audits, which seemed to exclusively target my property. She'd show up at odd hours with a tape measure, a notepad, and once a folding stool, stationing herself across the street to scribble notes about my garage's non-compliant energy. I watched from my living room as she spent an entire Saturday measuring the distance between my garage and the neighbor's fence, muttering to herself and occasionally shooting me disapproving glares. She started dropping by during my restoration sessions, demanding I explain why I needed 3 different socket wrenches for a 1970 Ford Mustang rebuild. She even recorded me on her phone, narrating like she was filming a true crime documentary. Here we see the resident engaging in excessive mechanical activity, potentially destabilizing neighborhood harmony, she intoned while I tried to align a carburetor. Her obsession hit new heights when she learned I was restoring a 1969 Chevy Camaro. She declared it evidence of automotive gang affiliations and began logging what she called suspicious vehicular movements. Never mind that the Camaro was missing its transmission and hadn't moved since the Reagan administration. One evening, I caught her measuring my garage's exterior with a laser pointer, calculating permissible square footage ratios while reciting HOA bylaws like a preacher quoting scripture. Evelyn had memorized every subsection of the HOA covenant and could rattle off rules about outbuilding aesthetics with alarming precision. Her surveillance tactics grew bolder. She installed a decorative wind chime on a 12-foot pole near my property line. The chime never made a sound, but it did have a tiny camera that she checked daily with a monocular from her patio. When I brought this up at an HOA meeting, she claimed it was for monitoring migratory bird patterns. Then came the propaganda campaign. Evelyn started whispering to neighbors that I was running an unlicensed chop shop, storing hazardous automotive chemicals and attracting unsavory car enthusiasts. She produced a 4-page newsletter titled Willow Creek Safety Alert, complete with blurry photos of my garage and captions like industrial encroachment endangers our peace. The newsletter included a diagram showing the disruption radius of my garage and recommended that neighbors invest in noise-canceling headphones. It was a work of paranoid genius. Evelyn had convinced herself that my perfectly legal hobby was a threat to everything from property values to the local squirrel population. She even suggested residents avoid walking near my house during peak mechanical hours, which she defined as any time I was in my garage. The rumors didn't stop there. Evelyn claimed my restoration projects were lowering property values by introducing an industrial aesthetic. She told one neighbor that my welding torch posed a fire hazard to the entire block. Another time, she warned that my frequent visitors, a couple of car enthusiasts who brought donuts and admired my work, were potential loiterers. In reality, my visitors were polite gearheads who shared my passion for classic cars and occasionally helped me lift heavy parts. But to Evelyn, they were a roving band of troublemakers. The breaking point came on a quiet Thursday morning. I returned from an auto parts store to find Evelyn inside my locked garage, rearranging my toolboxes and labeling my shelves with her own system of color-coded stickers. Just performing a routine HOA safety check, she chirped, as if she hadn't just cut my padlock with industrial-grade bolt cutters. My vintage snap-on wrenches were now organized into categories labeled safe, questionable, and requires oversight. She'd even taped a handwritten safety protocol sign to my workbench, mandating that all visitors wear hard hats and sign a liability waiver. Most infuriatingly, she'd rearranged my carburetor rebuild kit by potential environmental impact. I noticed the severed padlock on the floor and realized she'd committed breaking and entering. Evelyn had also installed what she called community safety enhancements: neon safety tape on every tool, a poster about responsible automotive stewardship, and a fire extinguisher she'd bolted to my wall with a plaque reading Evelyn Harper Safety Initiative. She'd even created a garage compliance manual, a spiral-bound booklet with rules she'd invented, including mandatory ear protection for neighbors, a logbook for all garage visitors, and a requirement that I submit bi-weekly progress reports to the HOA. I called the sheriff's department immediately. Deputy Larson arrived, took one look at the bolt cutters Evelyn had left on my workbench, and shook his head. "Is this the same woman who reported a neighbor for excessive garden gnome placement?" he asked. It was, indeed, the same. Evelyn, who'd once called 911 over a kid's lemonade stand for unpermitted commercial activity. Larson listened as I explained the situation, then turned to Evelyn, who claimed she had implied HOA authority to inspect my garage. The deputy wasn't buying it. He issued her a formal trespassing warning and told her to stay 20 feet away from my property. He also suggested she reread the actual HOA bylaws, which didn't grant her the powers she'd imagined. Evelyn didn't take the warning lightly. The next day, she placed neon yellow traffic cones around my driveway with signs reading warning, mechanical disturbance area. She distributed flyers claiming my garage was causing elevated noise pollution and advised residents to detour around my street during my disruptive work hours. That was it. I'd had enough. I called my contractor friend, Mike, and asked him to expedite a partition wall I planned for my garage to separate my workspace from storage. Mike thought I was just being practical, but I had a different plan in mind. The following morning, I left my garage door unlocked and made a show of driving away just as Evelyn began her daily community patrol. I parked a block away and watched via my phone security app as she crept toward my garage, glanced around like a cartoon villain, and slipped inside. I gave her 20 minutes to settle in before returning. When I walked in, Evelyn was in full organizational mode, wearing natural gloves and wielding a label maker she pulled from her designer handbag. She was labeling my spark plugs by compliance level and muttering about unregulated automotive clutter while she was distracted. I quietly began installing the final section of the partition wall from the outside. Mike's design used modular panels that snapped into place, allowing me to complete the wall in under 15 minutes. Evelyn was so engrossed in her labeling project that she didn't notice the wall going up behind her. When she finally turned around and saw a solid cedar panel where the door had been, her face cycled through shock, fury, and indignation. "Nathan Carter, you dismantle this wall right now," she screamed, pounding on the wood. "This violates subsection 7B of the HOA covenant regarding access rights." I calmly explained through the wall that my garage was private property, and that she was trespassing again. I slid a flashlight, a granola bar, and a printed copy of the actual HOA bylaws through a small gap before sealing it shut. For the next 4 hours, Evelyn alternated between demanding her release and lecturing the wall about community conduct standards. At one point, she tried to bribe me with promises to waive all future HOA fees if I let her out. She even continued her organizational crusade, stacking my tools in neat rows and leaving sticky notes with suggestions for improved workflow. When Deputy Larson arrived, he tapped on the wall and called out, "Evelyn, you cozy in there. Or should we discuss your second trespassing charge?" The whole board had already been notified. It turned out Evelyn had a history of harassing other residents, one for overly vibrant flower beds, another for excessive porch furniture. The board voted unanimously to remove her as president. Deputies escorted Evelyn from my garage, still clutching her clipboard and ranting about conspiracies against community standards. As she was led away, I sipped my iced tea and admired my new partition wall. It wasn't just a practical addition, it was a monument to common sense. Prevailing over bureaucratic insanity, the neighborhood was quieter after that, and my Camaro restoration continued in peace. Evelyn's Lexus still cruises by occasionally, but her clipboard hasn't been seen since.